name is Dina Izo. I work with the Ecological Farming Association, and we work to help continue to promote the notion of education for farmers, both from a production standpoint and a standpoint of the many points of that come when one is in the sustainable ag world as a feeder, as a distributor, or whatever, wherever you are in this world of ag. Particularly, we have our big love for farmers, but want to acknowledge that all those who work within the food system are a big part of how farmers get to do their heartthrob, which is to feed people. So want to welcome all folks in that realm. I am an elder lesbian. I've been out for many moons. It's caused me great joy in my life, and some not so much joy, but it's worth every single solitary second to be able to live my authentic self. And so I welcome all of you who are here to help live and express their authentic selves. I want to give a really big thanks to Gabby Salazar, who thought of this session. As a cisgender ally, I was so pleased with her notion and coming to it. So I just want to give a shout out to Gabby for being the kind of ally that we all need in this world. So, woo, Gabby, thank you. You know, delighted to have you all here, and want to be with you for a little minute to breathe in summer and bid adieu on the exhale to our friend spring, because it sure was a hella spring as far as I can tell for everybody. We are really graced with three people from very diverse backgrounds and perspectives and life experience, who'll speak their truth about being queer farmers in 2020 America. We have Xochitl, who farms in the urban Bay Area, and Karen Washington, who farms in New York, and also Thea Maria Carlson, who farms in Sonoma County. Very different backgrounds, very different experiences, and we're here to help celebrate them by listening to their stories, and celebrate you by giving you the ability to speak your story also, because that's what this is about, for us to speak with each other about our life experiences as queer people in this world and farmers. So just a teeny bit about housekeeping. Obviously everyone's muted for reasons like you just heard with the dang siren. And then we're gonna, after our speakers share their stories, we're gonna pop into some breakout groups, which Thea will be attending to. She'll be our director there. We have a question, and then we're gonna come back together to just share our stories, your thoughts, your feelings, your everything right now, because the point of this is to give everyone safe space to speak their truth and be their authentic self without fear of retribution or judge or jam or slam. So that being that, we'll start off with Karen. Karen, thank you for joining us.
Yeah. Hi, everybody. Happy Pride. My name is Karen Washington. I'm a farmer. I tell people I grow food. I feed people body and mind. My pronouns are she, her, and Mama K. So what a 2020, year this has been. So I'm part of Rising Root Farm. We started our farm back in 2014. We come from New York City. We come from the urban farming movement. And our dream was one day that we would farm together. So our farm consists of 4 women. 3 of us are LGBTQ women. 2 are white women. 2 are Black women. And so we cover all bases, y'all, so no one is left out. in our farm. And so we grow mostly heirloom tomatoes, medicinal herbs, edible flowers, you name it, we grow it. And we pride ourselves in what is about food and social justice, which is really, really important. Our farm is a healing farm. And so whenever there's attacks, especially amongst LGBTQ family, we open our farm and people come. And they come and they're just in the essence of being close to the earth, because we feel that our farm is like that. It's a healing farm. But, it didn't start that way for me. I didn't grow up being a farmer. My parents weren't farmers. My grandparents weren't farmers. So people ask me time and time again, how did you get started in farming? And I just said, maybe it was in my DNA. Maybe it was in my DNA because, growing up as a Black person, in the 60s and 70s, the relationship to farming was all around slavery. So if I was young and I said to my parents, I want to be a farmer, they would have looked at me like I was crazy. And growing up, that's what it meant. Growing up, it meant slave work if you talked about becoming a farmer. But for me, that sort of changed back in the 1980s when I got involved in community garden work. And I saw how spiritual and how enriching putting my hands in the soil did for me. And so I went to this program in Santa Cruz, CASFIS, the Center for Agroecology and Sustainable Food System in 2008, came back and was on fire because I wanted to look at the broad scope of farming when it came to farm workers, LGBTQ people, Black farmers, you name it, and saw the inequality that was happening there. And so fast forward, I've been an advocate, an activist, really trying to make sure that when we talk about farming in general, we talk about diversity and inclusion in farming because about diversity, about the flowers, about the animals. But when it comes to the people, we're lacking that true diversity. So I've been on this mission, I would say for the last 10 years, really looking at the food system and asking the question why it's not diverse. Why do we have pockets of farmers? We have white farmers, we have Black farmers, we have farm workers, we have LGBTQ farmers, but we don't have farmers. And if you look along that pendulum of farming, it's predominantly male and white led. And so I know a lot of us on this panel are trying to break that glass ceiling, trying to make sure that people understand, especially me. I consider myself an elder, y'all. I consider myself an elder. And so my job is to make sure that I can break those silos, that I can kick those doors open for the young people behind me. And so in retrospect, when I talked about, growing up trying to be a farmer, I was blindsided. It was never taught to me what was my contribution as a Black person when it came to farming. Because like I said, the narrative was always around slavery. And then I started reading, I started speaking to people, I started getting as much education as possible because I did not get it in school. You don't get in New York City, you don't get agriculture or farming, anything like that in terms of education in school, in the public schools. And I had to find it on the outside. And what I found that really enriched me as a woman, as a Black woman, as an LGBTQ woman, as a farmer, what enriched me is the fact that my people who came in chains were not brought here because they were dumb or because they were strong. We were brought here because of our knowledge of agriculture. Boy, I want you to sit with that for a moment. Sit with that for a moment. All your life, you've been told that your contribution to agriculture and farming was slavery. And then all of a sudden you realize, wait a second. You were brought here because of agriculture? Yes. We were brought here. Seeds in our hair. My hair is nappy. My hair has locks. My hair has an afro. I don't care because my ancestors brought those seeds in our hair, and planted the seed to feed this country. Come on, folks. When you hear something like that, tell me, doesn't it blow your mind? It's like, wait a second. We brought seeds in our hair? Yes, because when we landed on the shores of the South, the low country, which was swampy, humid, the colonists could never have survived because they didn't know that sort of climate of agriculture, but we did. We knew the types of grain and seeds and rice and vegetables that we could plant to survive. We also brought our elements of knowledge, irrigation tools, the hoe, so many tools that we're using today, but we never got credit for. And so now I sit back and I feel now as a person that there's a contribution for us in agriculture, that I don't have to sit back and listen to other people talk about agriculture and feel distant from it. I now have that power to be part of the American experience, of the American contribution as a Black female in agriculture. And once you give that information to young brown and Black people, all of a sudden they're inspired because now they understand that they have a part of history that for so long was taken from them. And so for me, once I knew that, I just went on fire. I just went on fire because now I feel that, you know what, I'm proud to say that I'm a farmer. I'm proud to say that because I know now the contribution that my people has given to agriculture. Now, there have been pitfalls along the way. We done lost a lot of land. That continues, even though we're going through this moment, y'all, we're going through this moment of COVID, which is killing Black and brown people. We're going through what you're seeing now, the demonstrations of police brutality and racial and wealth inequality. We just celebrated Juneteenth, and so this is America. This is the American experience. And we got to face it, y'all. We got to face it because so many of us is left behind. And what people are realizing as they're standing on food lines, the importance of farmers. And now all of a sudden people realize, wait a second, they can't eat the jewelry. They can't eat the cars. They can't, in order to survive, you got to have food. And so now everyone's attention now in this moment of crisis is on the farmer. And so hopefully as we move forward, we can say that farming is something that you should feel prideful in doing. And it is an essential. It is one of the essential workers of this country. And so we have to make sure that there's space for farmers of all ethnicities, but then also let's talk about the farm worker, because I hate that word farm worker, because I remember my people were the sharecroppers. And now you have more Latinx people coming from the global South, people coming over, and the majority of them are people of color, working them fields, doing the work, but they're not getting the credit as being farmers. They're farmers. So we got to make sure as farmers, as this is Pride Month, and if we can show our pride, we also have to make sure that we understand ourselves as human beings. And if one sector of our farming family is failing or needs help, we have to make sure, if we're talking about racial inequality or racial injustice, we got to make sure if we are who we are as pride people, as people who come from a framework of love, of people who say that we are for inclusion, then we have to make sure that we don't leave nobody behind. Nobody. And then when we look at the broad spectrum of agriculture in this country, if we take pride in the different colors, we got the rainbow flag, y'all. We got the rainbow flag, but do we have the rainbow people of all nationalities being uplifted and included in the work that we do? And so this is me, y'all. This is me. They call me Mama K. I wear it proudly because I got the scars. I've been there. But what I'm trying to do is to make a way for the next group of brown and Black and LGBTQ people that are going to come behind me, that they have a place where they can have land, access to capital, access to resources, because still there's a power dynamic of agriculture that's controlled by a handful of white men. And we got to tear down that system to make sure that when we talk about agriculture, look at the word agriculture. There's that word culture that we don't think about when we talk about agriculture. It's the culture, that framework of culture that we have to think about to make sure that when we do the work and we hold up that rainbow flag of different colors, that this food system, this farming system have the colors of different races and different people. That's all I got to say. I'm Karen Washington, farmer. I grow food, I feed people body and mind. Rising Roof Farm is where I farm. And in the Bronx, the Garden of Happiness. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you so much, Karen. Thank you so much. I want to include the folks in the chat. Kendra G says, indeed. And Jesse Z says, so true, Mama K. So true, Mama K. Kendra D says, doing the work, not getting the credit, and not getting the money. Ain't that the sad truth? And then from Jesse Z, we need wealth redistribution. Say that. We need wealth redistribution. Yes. Danielle Humphrey, she, her, says to everybody, that's right. And we're kind of, yes. And I'm sorry, Mariah Gomez, I'm sorry if I mispronounced your first name. She said, see. Thank you. And Kendra G says, thank you, Mama K. Dope. Indeed. Thank you for everything that you do and everything that you said and all that you're going to do. We so appreciate you. So appreciate you, Mama K. Thank you. So next up, for some more inspiration and thoughts and deeds and done from a new perspective is Thea Maria Carlson. Thea, you want to tell us all about you?
Sure. Thank you, Dina, and thank you so much, Karen, for starting us off with all that energy and amazing inspiration and storytelling. So yeah, my name's Thea Maria Carlson. I live in Sonoma County outside Santa Rosa. The land I live on was originally stewarded by the Mayacamas and Mutistul people. And I live in an intentional community where we steward 400 acres of land with about 30 people together. My partner and I are the only queer people here. We feel very welcome here, but it's not nearly as diverse as Karen's situation. And it also feels important to be bringing some ideas of how things could be a little bit different than the conventional white heteronormative culture here, as well as innovative ideas for how we grow food together. So I also did not grow up with an agricultural family and don't have any ancestors that I can connect to who farmed for a living. My great grandfather had immigrated from Portugal and had a garden in the city, but his employment was owning a liquor store. So yeah, so I don't know of any of my ancestors who actually farmed for a living. So it wasn't something that occurred to me as I was growing up as something to do. And it was in my late teens, early 20s when I both discovered my connection to agriculture and also began exploring my queer identity. And yeah, there were a number of different experiences that led me to that, both of those things being important in my life. One, when I was just finishing high school, I grew up in Santa Cruz, California. Although I didn't attend the CASFIS program that Karen did, that was the first farm that I went to as a child on a field trip. And it was a wonderful place to experience a farm. And I particularly remember seeing the bees, and I later became a beekeeper. But that farm made a big impression on me with all its beautiful diversity of flowers and vegetables and fruit and the bees. So when I was growing up, my mom always wanted to have us eat organic food when we could. We didn't have a lot of money, so we couldn't always afford it, but it was the highest priority in our household. So I grew up with a sense of we don't want to eat pesticides, and so we're going to eat organic food, and it's better for the environment. And then when I was just finishing high school, right before the summer, I was walking down the street in Santa Cruz, and a young man who was about my age came up to me and said, "Hey, you know, what do you think about farm workers and the rights of farm workers?" And we got into a conversation, and I decided to volunteer with the organization that he was volunteering with, standing on the street, the Western Farm Workers Association. And so I started going to agricultural fields and places where farmers who are working in agricultural fields in California were living, and they were all from Mexico and other countries in Latin America. And it really opened my eyes to all the injustice in our food system, and how so many of the people who are growing the food in California couldn't afford to buy food for their families. They were, you know, basically surviving on very subsistence food and often needing to have emergency food. They were also being exposed to really horrible pesticides, getting sick, and being paid very, very little, usually less than the minimum wage, and getting deported for absurd small infractions. And so it was really eye-opening for me, and something that I thought about from a kind of justice and labor standpoint. But at that point, I had no idea that I might become a farmer. And then over a couple of years into college, I was focusing on environmental science, and I went to Brazil, to the Amazon, and studied abroad there. And when I was there, I kind of went there with this ethic that I'd grown up with this kind of, you know, white environmentalism of, we got to save the rainforest and protect it from being cut down. And I went there and I saw that so much of the Amazon was being cut down to grow food. And so that actually what we choose to eat has a huge impact on the environment. And that if I really wanted to both attend to the needs of people and the earth, that maybe agriculture might be a way to do both of those things. So that was when my calling to be in agriculture kind of came forward. And over the couple of decades since then, I've worked on farms, primarily biodynamic farms, and also in school gardens and urban agriculture. And I currently work with the Biodynamic Association as my primary job. And then I also grow food and raise goats and chickens here on this land. So it was really interesting to hear from Dina the invitation to participate in this particular conversation, because usually I'm invited to things because of my connection to the Biodynamic Association. And I think this is the first time I've been invited to something as a queer farmer. And so just thinking about my queer identity and my identity as a farmer, which, you know, is a complex identity for me, because I used to grow food for a living, and now I grow food, but it's not what pays my living expenses. Helping other people grow food is what I get paid to do. But I think one of the things that's most important to me about my queer identity is living in integrity, kind of like you were, I think both Dana and Karen have referred to and what they were speaking in, and really understanding like what is my authentic self, what is important to me, and how do I live out my values, and not accepting conventional wisdom, questioning assumptions, kind of really thinking about how could things be. And I think for me in my life in this community and my work, a lot of that in recent years has been how do we address issues of racial justice in agriculture? How do I help my community that is all white, the organization I work with that has historically been almost all white? How do we actually wake up to our role in this and stop being asleep in the system of white supremacy? And I think that part of what has led me to be able to step up in that is the process I went through and being able to step up and say, yes, I'm a queer person and this is my life and I'm going to live it even though people don't want me to do that. And I don't encounter a lot of discrimination based on my queer identity, but I do encounter quite a bit of pushback for the work that I've done over the past few years to bring more issues of racial justice into the Biodynamic Association. And I really am just so grateful that I can keep coming back to the sense of this is what I feel is right, and it's what's important. And so I need to keep pushing it forward and also keep learning and keep understanding that I don't know a lot, and I keep needing to make mistakes, mess up, apologize, keep learning, and going forward, and recognizing that a different future is possible, that I don't have to take the idea that, you know, my only future is being in a heterosexual relationship, and I also don't have to take the idea that our only future is continuing in systems of racism and white supremacy, and that there is another future possible, and that we all can be part of moving it forward. So I'm very grateful to be part of this group and getting to explore today all the different aspects of our identities and how they influence what we're doing in the world on a physical level and on all the other levels that we're doing our work. So I'll leave it there. Thank you so much.
Myself. Thank you, Thea. Yes, identities. Who are we in this world right now? Who do we want to be in this world right now? You know, they're very deep and moving questions. And one of the things that I am so grateful to all of our speakers for is a base identity is that you see food as what it is, this essential part of our culture, a part of our humanity or our humanness, human beingness, as a friend of mine would say, and and that part about feeding being something that far more connects us on that level that we're on this evening than divides us, right? Because we are looking, I think, as human beings for the thing that unites us, and food is that thing. It's super powerful, and I'm just so grateful to all of you for doing that, including our next speaker, Xochitl, who does something that I just have to take my hat off to, which is grow food in a city, in a true, Karen, I know you do also. Growing food in a city is really just an astounding, amazing endeavor, and how it really speaks to feeding people so they feel better and think better. And so with that, I will hand this over to Xochitl, who will tell us about what their life is like, their reality is like being an urban farmer in San Francisco. Xochitl?
Yeah, hi everyone. My name is Xochitl, and I am videotaping or communicating from occupied Ohlone territory up in San Francisco. And so here I manage a 6-acre farm called Hummingbird Farm, and it's a combination of restoration, urban farming, and although it is 6 acres, we probably have a little over an acre in production, but the main platform of the farm is to integrate a lot of our organizing tactics of not necessarily looking at our space as feeding the community from the ground itself, but organizing ourselves so that we can integrate local farms. Because the reality is that although we do have 6 acres, there's no way we can grow enough food for the city, but we can organize people in the city to provide healthy food. And I'll explain a little bit more of what we've done during COVID to reflect a little bit of that. But just so I can start sharing a little bit about myself and how I ended up getting to Hummingbird. I grew up in Washington State on the Yakima Reservation, and we moved there when I was 6 from LA after fleeing some just gang violence, urban violence, just being in a bad part of town in LA. So we ended up moving to the Yakima or Toppenish on the Yakima Reservation. Shortly after, there was a drive-by in our house. And so I grew up there, and although I would say by the time I was 8 or 9, I was pretty aware of my sexuality, that I was interested in people of the same sex. But that was like 8 or 9. But by the age of 4 and 5, I was pretty aware that I was a person of color. Those identity factors had been solidified. I knew I was the child of an immigrant. I remember being a kid and having to translate. I'm the oldest child, so out of that, I was like first one obtaining documents to try to translate in English. So a lot of these like identities of like being policed either by like internally by like being a model citizen, or just being policed on my own self of identity and like my sexuality as a young age. So although I was aware of these layers of my identity, I was continuously putting them away and keeping myself busy and figuring out ways to like navigate through high school I was just trying to get through my sexuality. I went to the University of Washington, where my family comes from a legacy of farmers. Everyone's been farming up till being my current generation. So none of my cousins are interested. I'm the only one that's still managing this, but a lot of it comes from just being like, there's a spiritual component to it that I think I've been able to weave myself, or it's been easier to manage to see myself in this role as we navigate through this. And through this, I mean climate chaos, right? There's 2 big things going on right now. We have a pandemic of COVID-19, which is amplified by the conditions of the ecological situation that we're in. But we also have racism, which has caused a lot of these ecological issues to go by. So as I was thinking of this prompt and just trying to see how my life is shaping the way I'm looking for helping navigate what the future looks like. So I left school trying to, escape farming in a way, just kind of move beyond farming and obtain and look at academia. Again, this ties in because academia was a way for me as a queer individual to better myself, to use academia to keep myself busy and to get myself out of a small town into a big city. I went to Seattle. I was like, I'm going to do something different. I'm not going to go into farming. And I've always done stuff as a kid. I was always growing stuff with my family and whatnot, but it's like, I want to do something else, right? And so I ended up getting a degree in forestry. And then shortly after undergrad, moving to LA. And then I ended up, the first economic collapse happened. And then I couldn't really find a stable job. I ended up finally getting, I was trying to do some restoration work on forest or something, but overall, but I was also trying to try living my life as a queer person and continue to develop what that means and the overlaps of being a son of an immigrant. And this is again, during the whole Prop 8 campaign and figuring out how do my layers as an immigrant, as a brown person, as a queer person, and this is still having these conversations without actually addressing myself as a farmer. I'm still overlapping all these intersectionalities of my identity, but not including farming. And again, this is as I get older, the plants continuously come back to me, and then they integrate what that is. And so when I was in LA, I got involved. I got a job at the LA Community Garden Council, and I was building community gardens around the city. And not necessarily that I was building them, but I was helping organize people in their community so they could build their own gardens, figure out their own structure, their own rules, and just converting these old empty lots into spaces for food. And in a sense, that is restoration. And as I get, now that I can have the language for it, that is first levels of introducing carbon sequestration in urban settings. How do we convert these empty lots into places where we're catching carbon? And so I built a couple gardens. One in Florence Firestone was a predominantly Black and Brown community, and another one in Elysian Valley, which is was a place seeing a lot of gentrification at the time. So there was these discussions of what does it mean, and although I wasn't able to address them then, because these are spaces, these are communities plots where people were building in their communities. The ideas that came out of this that I still carry with myself and how we organize the farm now is that we don't have any fences. Fences and enclosed garden spaces tend to reinforce settler politics of what a community garden looks like. And what I mean by that is that unless you have a plot to the garden, you don't have access to the space. And again, they're no longer community gardens because as long as there's that gate. At the current farm at Hummingbird, there is no large fences to keep anyone out, which is both a good thing and a bad thing, but I can go into that later. So these new ideas, and I was really interested in like decolonizing my diet at the time. This is in my early 20s. But then I really just started looking at bigger pictures that food, when we say decolonize our diet, we tend to associate that with food, and food is not the only relationship we have with plants. We, as humans, throughout the world, we've brought plants along for our trips wherever we get migrated, whether that's forcefully during times of war, during times of peace. We will take plants with us, and it's either for food, medicine, building materials, spirituality, and art. And sometimes one plant could be all five of those, or sometimes one plant is just one of those elements. And so through this navigation of understanding these plants, I really started looking at it, okay, what does it mean? Like, what is this relationship that I'm seeing that I don't have the language for? And so as I continued to explore this, I also ended up going to UC Santa Cruz at the University of California Center of Agroecology, Sustainable Food Systems. But there, although I was already growing flowers, it was really more where I was able to amplify this spiritual element of how flowers fit into everything, not just in a biodynamic, diverse ecosystem, but what does it mean for us to look at these flowers spiritually, both in where they have migrated, again, by force, and how much, as we're looking at removing racist statues and Confederate imagery and whatnot, all this also exists in our ecological knowledge, on our institutionalized ecological knowledge. What we understand as botany, as ecology, all these, these names of settlers and colonizers and whatnot, name families of flowers, families of plants. And so, within that, we lose the legacy of where they come from, the people who build relationships with them. Again, for physical, they were eating them, building with them, praying with them, whatever those organisms were. And so when I was at CASFIS, because again, you're in an institution and you have access to so much more just biomaterial information, and that is part of entering an academic institution. You have access to material to explore some of these ideas. And so within there, my second year, with the help of my cohort, we did a Decolonize Your Flower, where we were really addressing some of these issues. And within this, we were integrating queer ecology. And I'm going to explain a little bit what that is. Queer ecology, it takes this idea, this politicized idea of queer and the social concept that it comes with it, but it helps add these questioning, these resistance to this idea of ecology, because just as queer is a social concept, so is ecology. And the people who created, who have created what we understand as the validation of science are white, hetero, cisgender, wealthy. These are the people who've classified all our information, who give their names and their legacies to our plant material. And so at UC Santa Cruz, we were integrating, again, decolonizing all the, where this, you know, the plants that were coming from Africa, Asia, and the Americas into Europe, and then challenging what does that mean? What is the technology that's coming to that? And how do we, as we move forward, just like the rest of our society, what are the ecological tidbits that we can also deconstruct as we build new resistance into the future? And so what I mean by that, like greenhouses, like, yes, we use them to extend our season, but that is technology based out of colonialism. We have to create plants so they exist in ecosystems where they don't belong. And in that case, we extend our seasons, and now we're using them for our future. But that's the way we integrate some of this information into contemporary like ways that we're organizing. So that was queer ecology. And again, nature just shows us hundreds and hundreds of examples of how queerness is a survival tactic, whether it's birds, microorganisms, you know, it's, again, the reason why it's hindered is because humans have, and it's a specific type of thought process in humans that has created these stigmas. And we continue to fight that even as people. And, you know, as we're negotiating this time during COVID as queer farmers, this isn't the first time that a virus has impacted our community. As Indigenous people, there was smallpox and all kinds of other viruses that came in and took out a generation of elders. Then we had, you know, as a queer person, there's HIV, and, you know, there's although this impacted a lot of the urban gays, there's a lot of folks in rural spaces that were becoming positive and refusing to get tested or to show that, because there were queer folks in rural spaces who were, again, their identity as a farmer was letting them live in those communities, not their identity as a queer person, but their identity as a farmer. And for those select few who had access to, again, when you let people in, that is part of those, that's a community. That's when we choose our community, right? And within this, similar to being a farmer and being a queer person, it's not necessarily that, you know, I think the original prompt was like, when did we come out? And I feel coming out, this idea is a very white concept. And what I tend to prefer is like letting you in. And if I'm letting you know who I am, like I'm letting you into my life, and that's me choosing you to like invest emotional energy, like social energy, whatever it is. But it's not my role to be like, you know, I don't tell people I'm a brown person. I don't tell people I'm this, that, you know, I invite people to be part of within my own social circle. Because I feel like, you know, there's a lot of things that through colonialism, we don't have this ability to transfer generational wealth in a capital sense, but then we have other kinds of wealth that is passed down. We have ecological wealth, we have social health and spiritual wealth. And as we navigate through climate chaos, you know, we need to do all that. As farmers, we are physically helping facilitate the sequestration of carbon. And I think that is something that we should value. We are part of the solution of anything that we grow, whether they're weeds and we maintain and we remove our so-called weeds. We're still we're nurturing spaces to catch carbon. And I think that is when we're working with youth, those are the things that we're emphasizing with them. So I'm going to talk a little bit about how I ended up at the farm, and then I'll wrap it up there. So after CASFIS, well, I was at CASFIS actually, there was a group of youth in San Francisco organizing to build a space. And so while I was, again, at school, they were door knocking, talking to their supervisors, obtaining, you know, sitting with Park and Rec. So the farm is 6 acres. It's located in McLaren Park. It's the 3rd largest park in San Francisco. And so all these youth, they coined the word urban campesinx. And then Karen, Mama Kay had mentioned about farm worker and farmer. And in Spanish, there's the same campesino means both farmer and farm worker. And so the youth, as in trying to include gender non-conforming folks and people on the spectrum, they coined the word urban campesinx to essentially mean that urban farmer, but adding the X at the end to remove the O and removing gender, because as they were organizing to improve a space in their community, they were aware that they were being inclusive with who are those earth workers, who are those folks. They were stepping away from this white farmer idea, that, you know, there's a lot more representation that isn't there. And so these youth were, you know, working with the organization of Poder. They helped build this farm. I had finished at UC Santa Cruz, and I moved to San Francisco, and I just started volunteering with them. They had the land, but they were all urban folks. They were all in their early 20s, late teens. So I first just started getting involved, volunteering and giving them direction, but being conscious of not wanting to be like, it wasn't my space, right? I was there volunteering. After about a few months, 4 or 5 months, they asked me if I wanted to be their farm manager. And I have a full-time job. I do edible landscaping around the Bay. So this is me working at this farm, is an after job commitment, but it's much more rewarding. The community effort and who uses the space. In the morning, it's open. There's a lot of Asian folks. So the Excelsior, a little bit of the neighborhood, it's a Latinx API community. So in the morning, there's a lot of Asian folks that do Tai Chi in the center spaces. We get bird watchers. We get a lot of the Latinx community that come out and help. But the space is an organizing space. We're integrating climate justice, what those discussions look like, into the neighborhood, with just direct interaction and growing crops that we do get to consume, but also provide a visual stimuli, a visual connection. So, for example, our corn, we can't grow enough corn to feed the whole block, but we can grow enough corn so that everyone in the block can remember these plants, and have those interactions, interact with them, see them. We are organizing. So since COVID, we have been working with the other school gardens in the space, that because there are no students at school, we've been working with them to grow food there, because our parent organization, Poder, has been organizing food boxes that then get donated to people in San Francisco who are COVID sensitive, who are high risk. So we're moving food bank stuff, but we're also supplementing some of the stuff we're growing on the farm, plus some of the other urban, to the high schools in the area, what their farm managers are doing. So we're incorporating these whatever we're able to produce back into the community. And we're also building relationships with farmers in the North Bay. And these were conversations we were having post some of the big fires, because, you know, whether it's an earthquake or something large that happens in the city, you know, if we look at other locations around the nation, when the climate disaster hits, those communities have to fend for themselves. So what we're trying to do now is build those relationships now. So if something does happen, we already have working relationships with farmers in the North Bay to channel food into the neighborhood. Because again, we can't grow enough food for San Francisco on our space, but we can organize ourselves and people around to provide food to them. And I feel like that is part of the beauty and kind of the role that urban spaces work. That, you know, we should really culturally integrate plants that feed visual nutrients, spiritual nutrients are fed through the interactions of these plants, but also trying to fulfill those physical needs, and that requires building relationships. So I'll leave it there. I'm sure there'll be more, but thank you for your time. And yeah.
Okay, thank you. I want to, that was awesome. Something that I just want to say before I get to the chat box real quick, acknowledge others' thoughts, is that the notion of presenting a visual about how food grows for urban people is just so meaningful, because it changes the idea that we ones have, and even middle ones and elders, that, you know, food grows in the produce department, because it doesn't. right? It grows in the ground. And so to give folks, the urban folks, this visual about how food really is just so essential, whether they want to grow it or not. At least they got a little notion of that it comes out of the ground and there's a leaf and there's a this and there's a that. And that is so, it's just so fabulous. I want to give big props to that and read from the chat. Kendra says, I appreciate Xochitl's and Karen speaking about farming as a kind of spiritual practice. Mm-hmm. And then Jesse C says, yep, it's a continuation of our ancestors' magic. Danielle says, yes, me too. I mean, I'm guessing you all can sort of fill in where their comments came. Kendra wanted to say, food is not the only relationship we have with plants, right? ACHE, yes. Many folks in my, and this is from Jesse, many folks in my neighborhood, including myself, are blocked from our community garden plots because they were taken by the first gentrifiers. Ouch. Angela says that was a what was being spoken was beautiful. Kendra G says, I hope queer and Afro ecologies can create the cultural frameworks for our farms of the future. Yep. Well, Jesse says, actually, yep. And Kendra says, definitely. Thank you for lifting up those who lost their lives to the pandemic of AIDS, HIV/AIDS. It brings a tear to my eyeball because I lost many sisters and brothers right there. Angela says, well said. Jesse moves on to, most of us of the global South were community oriented from the start. That's a conversation we can have in a minute. We're almost there. I just want to give everybody's voice. Jesse Z says, thank you, Xochitl, thank you. Angela Weston says, this is an awesome conversation. Thank us for organizing. You're welcome. This is where we get to lift our voice, our pleasure. Thanks to Xochitl, phenomenal. Sorry, but she can only stay until 5, but thanks for your, Evan says, I'm sorry, I can only stay till 5. Thanks for your talks. Nice to see you all, queer farmers. So with that, I'm gonna pop it on over to Thea to move us to our breakout. We've got about a half of an hour for that. So Thea, bring it.
Wait, I want to talk about community agreements first.
Oh, I'm sorry, Rebecca. I'm sorry. So sorry. Thank you. Thank you. Go.
Okay. Hi, everyone. I'm Rebecca. I would help to organize this and just wanted to mention a little something about community agreement. As we break into these little sessions, I want to remind us to listen deeply. And I have 4 others also. Stay curious, be open to learning, don't make assumptions. Speak from your own experience. Also embrace difference, practice yes and thinking, right? That's kind of the methodology of improv. If you say, but, the conversation kind of stops there. Yes, and tell me more, and confidentiality. So the stories that people are sharing are only theirs to share. We're gonna keep it within the groups and within the room if people are being open enough to share, just honor that. Thank you all for coming.
Thank you, Rebecca. Thank you. So, okay, with that, Thea.
Great. Yeah, and I just put those agreements in the chat so everyone can see them while you're in your group. So we'll be in groups of 3 to 4 people, I think mostly 3. The question that we're inviting you to share about is, how do your identities influence your work in the world? So however you identify, we have a lot of people who identify as queer here. We are not assuming that everyone identifies as queer, and we all have many identities. So just take a moment to reflect. And if you would like to share with others, we'll invite you to do that in a moment. If you're in a place where you can't really share, it's fine to join a group if you want to listen, or if you're like not interacting at all, if you're moved away from your computer, you can just stay in the main room during the breakout. So that way we make sure that whoever does go into the breakouts has at least a couple other people who are willing to engage with them. So we'll have 12 minutes for this part. And so the invitation is that each person has about 3 minutes to share. I'll send a little reminder to invite you to move on to the next person. So, so each person has 3 minutes to share anything that comes up for you in terms of how your identities affect your work in the world. And then the other folks in your group can just listen. And if you all get to share your stories and you still have time, then you're welcome to use that time however you like. And again, keeping in mind that the stories people share are theirs to share. And so when we come back, we'll invite you to share something from your own experience or something about the experience of sharing with each other, but not sharing someone else's stories here or anywhere else. I'll go ahead and open the rooms, and you'll need to click to go into the room, and we're doing that just to make sure that everyone is actively choosing to do that if they want to. I know that some folks are having to drop off, and so yeah, thank you for those who are leaving us now, and I'll let everyone who wants to have a small group conversation move into that now.
Actually, I agree with what Catherine said. I was just affirming what Danielle said. As a Black woman and a queer Black mother, I think it's really important that we're reclaiming the language that we're using to define our movements and our organizing. A lot of the language has been so co-opted to work towards the benefit of white supremacy culture. I think that, yeah, queer folks really have already redefined what family is, and even let that extend to changing legislation so that we could protect and care for our family, even though the government doesn't want that to happen. And I'm really interested from Mama Kay and Xochitl about if there are any policy recommendations, whether it's in your particular state or in your city or on a national level. What are the legislations that we're pushing for? How do we coalesce enough elected officials who have our interests as Black and brown farmers, queer farmers, people who are interested in climate justice? How do we coalesce these individuals, get them into office, and then help them to push forward the change in legislation and policy that we need to protect the planet and protect people?
That sounds like a direct question, Mama Kay. And Xochitl, do you have you've got a few minutes?
I'm going to answer that quickly. You know, there's a lot of policy out there, especially collectively, really trying to get, especially for young farmers, get rid of the debt that you have for school. You know, trying to get rid of tuition debt. I mean, really try, because that's been really a hindrance for a lot of new farmers. The debt that you have, you know, that takes years to get rid of the college debt that you have. So that's being done on a national level. But what I would suggest is everyone, the national level is hard, but the local level is where you can make your mark. What are some of the changes that you can do at the local level within your city or your town or the county that you can do to change things, the shift of things. I mean, look what is happening with Black Lives Matter and how things are really changing at a local level when it comes to police brutality. Right now, even this is, you know, Pride Month. And so a lot of people in New York City, LGBTQ people in New York City are marching again, the rights for queer people, again, to feel safe, to be safe to be walking the street, especially trans people who have been really victimized brutally. And so my suggestion, if things are going to change, try to change it on a local level. That's my advice, because I'm always out there marching and yelling and screaming.
So, do you have any advice?
Yeah, I'll start with just going off to some policy stuff. You know, Green New Deal is something that we could be looking at as far as how it impacts farming, carbon sequestration of that. There's a lot of conversation of defunding the police, and you know, that leads to a discussion of where those resources can go. So again, these are things that could be done at a local level. And just a policy, and it does, you know, it should be, I think, anti-Blackness should be something that we kind of organize around. So it's like, it may not be an institutional policy, but just how we organize our spaces. Because I think those, taking the larger movements that are going on and really having those discussions, those spaces for not just like people of color in farming, but like queer folks, and having more of these spaces to dialogue around how all this intersection, how all of this intersects with us now and resonates with us now, to again keep those discussions local. But just one other, just kind of going with the cultural practice, is just language. Language is super important, and just a reminder that organizing for queer justice, for land liberation, these are generational movements. So we have to keep these ideas alive, and we need to be able to provide frameworks so youth today can follow that through. And there's a great example of all the youth-led marches that are leading around the country. These are the next generation. We need them to do all aspects of society: doctors, farmers, florists, you know, other, you know, biologists, etc. So providing avenues for this, and just a very simple queer ecology is how we refer to our flowers. This is something very simple that, you know, pollen producer and pollen receiver, or fruit producer. And I think that's just a very simple way to step away from the binary in our ecological spaces, because when we're like this male flower and this female flower, we're reinstating this heteropatriarchy. And that's something simple. That's something we can teach our youth, like, hey, this flower produces pollen and this flower makes a fruit. And again, it's the same idea, same botany, but just it's something that we can incorporate so that we can help build this generational transcendence by allowing youth to have, it's the same information, but we're stepping away from the binary. So those are just two things, or a couple of things that just throw in there. But thank you. That's a great question.
Yeah, just these couple of things that'll blow up your mind. I thought I'd mention. Thank you so much. There's a bunch of stuff in the chat that I want to read because we're at 5:30. I want to respect everybody's time. I'm gonna bring it around first and foremost for those who are still with us. And there's 10 folks that we cannot see. Do you want to move on with convo? We can convo, or do you want us like be done? You're at the end of your week. You want to go have your dinner. Spoke your heart, your mind, your soul, and you want to get out. I want to just leave space because it feels very open right now, right? I just want to say we can like click off to this notion of being queer farmer conversation to just like conversation with a bunch of queers who love food and eating and each, you know, like the movement and want to be and have a little time and space to talk a little more together, or we can just simply like say bye-bye, give care to yourselves and others, and we're done. I just want to open it up to that opportunity. I mean, it's nice. It's a beautiful Friday evening. I don't know where peeps' heads are. So y'all want to leave? Go home, go eat, be done. Yes. Give me a little shaky. All the people I can see at the very least. Bye-bye then. Just wanted to open up that space in case anyone was feeling a need to, you know, to say something or share something else. So that being that, thank you all. I'm gonna get a little kooky and show my t-shirt. Pardon my big boobies, but just remember, first Pride was a riot. Just wanted to say that. Just wanted to throw that out there. And thank you for being there. The notion of this was to honor queer farmers on whatever level that word resonates with you and whatever that word farmer resonates with you. And then again, and to give honor and celebration to the fact that we're moving into a new season, right? Spring, she's done her thing, and summer, she's a coming. And I'm putting out intonation and thoughtfulness and hope that the season that comes was far more gentle to us than the season that was. And so with that, I will say good evening and thank you all for coming. Good night.